5 Hidden Signs Someone is Secretly Jealous of You. Have you ever felt an unspoken tension with someone after sharing good news? Maybe they smile, but it doesn't reach their eyes. Maybe they congratulate you, but their words feel hollow. Or perhaps they change the subject, downplay your achievement, or suddenly compete with you. What if I told you these could be signs of hidden jealousy? Here's a surprising truth: jealousy is often invisible, but its effects are powerful. Unlike open conflict, which is easy to recognize, jealousy hides in small gestures, passive-aggressive words, and forced smiles. It can drain your energy, create unnecessary conflict, and even sabotage relationships. Worse yet, if we fail to notice it, we might unknowingly absorb its negativity. In Buddhism, jealousy stems from attachment to comparison, to validation, and to the illusion of superiority. When someone is jealous of you, it is not truly about you, it is about their own suffering. But if we are not mindful, their hidden resentment can disturb our peace. So, how can you tell when someone secretly envies you? And more importantly, how should you respond? In this video, we will uncover 5 subtle but powerful signs of hidden jealousy and explore how Zen Buddhist wisdom can help you stay grounded, compassionate, and free from its toxic influence. Stay until the end, because the final sign is the most deceptive, and the one most people overlook. Sign number 1, they downplay your achievements, the subtle sting of envy. Picture this: after months, maybe even years, of perseverance, sacrifice, and self-discipline, you finally reach a milestone that fills you with pride. Perhaps you've secured a long-awaited promotion, completed a significant creative project, or achieved a personal goal that once seemed impossible. Overflowing with excitement, you share the news with someone you trust, expecting encouragement and joy. But instead, you are met with something unexpected: dismissal, indifference, or even veiled negativity. "Oh, that's nice." Uttered with a forced smile, lacking sincerity. "You got lucky. I mean, anyone could have done that. It's not that impressive." People do that all the time. At first, you may try to brush it off. Perhaps they're just having a bad day. But if this pattern repeats, you start to realize a deeper truth: your success unsettles them. Not because they dislike you, but because it forces them to confront their own self-doubt and insecurity. Instead of seeing your achievements as inspiration, they see them as evidence of their own shortcomings. Why do people react this way? Buddhism teaches that the root of suffering is attachment, and one of the strongest attachments is the ego's need for superiority. Many people unconsciously measure their worth not by their own progress but by how they compare to others. When someone close to them achieves success, it shakes their fragile sense of self-worth. Instead of celebrating your growth, they feel the need to minimize it, not because your success is insignificant, but because it feels like a threat to their identity. History is filled with examples of this. Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest inventors in history, faced relentless dismissal and sabotage from Thomas Edison, who refused to acknowledge Tesla's superior discoveries. Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer, was dismissed by her male contemporaries who could not accept that a woman had made such groundbreaking contributions to computing. In both cases, the resistance was not based on facts, but on ego-driven insecurity, an inability to accept someone else's brilliance without feeling diminished. The Zen approach: rising above the shadows. When confronted with such reactions, it is easy to feel hurt, frustrated, or even betrayed. But the Zen path teaches us to move beyond these emotions. The wise person does not shrink themselves to accommodate the insecurities of others. Instead, they walk their path unshaken, understanding that jealousy is simply a reflection of another person's suffering. Here's how you can respond: detach from the need for validation. True achievement does not require applause. Like a tree growing towards the sun, you do not need permission to flourish. See their reaction as a mirror. Their words say more about their struggles than about your success. Instead of internalizing their negativity, recognize it as a sign of their own inner turmoil, practice silent confidence. The greatest victories do not need to be announced. A candle does not lose its brightness just because someone refuses to acknowledge its light. As the Buddha once said, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Do not let another's insecurity become your burden. Walk forward unshaken, unwavering, and unbothered. Sign number 2, they turn everything into a competition, the illusion of winning. Have you ever shared a success, only to have someone instantly outdo your story? You mention a promotion, and they immediately talk about how they got a bigger one. You recall a joyful experience, and they counter with something even grander. You achieve something meaningful, and instead of celebrating with you, they subtly shift the spotlight back to themselves. At first, it may seem like normal conversation. After all, people like to share their own experiences. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. No matter what you do, they always have to one-up you. Your happiness is not something they can simply accept. Instead, it becomes a challenge, a silent rivalry that you never signed up for. But why? At the heart of this behavior is a deep-seated insecurity. When people feel uncertain about their own worth, they seek external validation, and the easiest way to feel valuable is to appear better than someone else. Instead of measuring success by inner growth or personal fulfillment, they measure it by comparison. They are not truly trying to compete with you, they are trying to outrun their own self-doubt. Buddhism teaches that attachment to superiority leads to suffering. The Buddha once spoke about the illusion of competition, explaining that the need to be better than others arises from craving and fear, the fear of being insignificant. The craving to be admired. But this is a bottomless pit. There will always be someone smarter, richer, more accomplished. The person who bases their happiness on winning will never find peace, because there will always be another race to run. We see this struggle echoed throughout history. In the Warring States period of China, warlords and kings fought endlessly, each trying to prove their dominance. But despite their victories, none of them found lasting peace. The wars only led to destruction, suffering, and, ultimately, the fall of those who sought to be the greatest. The true leaders of history, figures like Ashoka the Great, realized that true success is not found in conquest, but in inner wisdom and harmony. After years of warfare, Ashoka abandoned his thirst for domination and instead embraced Buddhism, spreading peace rather than competition. His legacy endures, while the warlords of his time are forgotten. So how do we deal with people who constantly compete with us? Do we prove ourselves? Outshine them? Put them in their place? A Zen master would say, why waste your energy fighting a battle that does not exist? Here's how to respond wisely: do not engage. You are not in their race. You have nothing to prove. If they need to win, let them. Their victory is meaningless. Recognize the root of their behavior. Their need to compete is not about you, it is about their own inner struggle. See it for what it is, and you will not be affected. Practice detachment. True success is not found in comparison, but in contentment. When you no longer seek approval, no competition can disturb your peace. The ocean does not compete with the river, the mountain does not compare itself to the sky. Each exists in its own way, and so should you. Sign number 3, they hide criticism behind advice or jokes, the subtle blade of words. Jealousy does not always announce itself with open hostility. It does not always take the form of blatant competition or cold indifference. Sometimes, it wears a smile, cloaks itself in humor, and arrives disguised as advice. It slips into conversations as a casual remark, a playful tease, a piece of helpful guidance. But beneath the surface, there is a sharp edge, designed to wound. You share an idea, and they chuckle, "Oh, you think that will work? Good luck with that." You express excitement about a new opportunity, and they smirk, "Well, don't get your hopes up too much. You accomplish something meaningful." And they say, "That's great, but you know, if I were you, I would have done it differently." At first, these comments seem harmless. After all, they are just jokes. Just advice. But why do they leave a lingering sting? Why do they make you second-guess yourself? Because they are not meant to uplift, they are meant to plant doubt. This is how jealousy operates when it does not want to be seen. Instead of direct confrontation, it takes a quieter approach, one that allows the jealous person to maintain an appearance of friendliness while still undermining your confidence. Buddhism teaches that words are powerful. The Eightfold Path emphasizes right speech, the understanding that our words create karma, shaping both our inner world and the world of those around us. A person who uses their words to belittle others, even subtly, is unknowingly creating suffering, not just for the target of their words, but for themselves. When one speaks from a place of jealousy, their words are poisoned by their own insecurities. It is not truly you they seek to bring down, it is their own feelings of inadequacy that they cannot escape. This pattern has repeated throughout history. Think of the famous philosopher Socrates, who challenged the wisdom of his time. His critics did not confront him directly at first. Instead, they mocked him, ridiculed his ideas, and spread doubt through whispers disguised as casual conversation. "He is just a foolish man, asking foolish questions," they said. But Socrates did not let their words define him. He saw through their disguised attacks, recognizing that their mockery was not a reflection of his ignorance, but of their fear of questioning their own beliefs. So how do you deal with those who use words as weapons, hidden beneath the disguise of humor or advice? Do not take their words to heart. Their remarks are not about you, they are a reflection of their own internal struggle. When you realize this, their words lose their power. Recognize the intention behind their speech. Do they truly want to help, or do they want to see you doubt yourself? Awareness is your shield, choose silence over reaction. Not every attack requires a counterattack. The Buddha once said, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does it belong?" The same is true for their words. If you do not absorb their negativity, it remains with them. A wise person does not engage in a battle of words. They do not allow hidden criticism to shake their confidence. Instead, they move forward, unshaken, knowing that no shadow of doubt can dim the light of self-awareness. Sign number 4, they secretly enjoy your struggles, the hidden satisfaction in jealousy. There is a certain kind of silence that speaks volumes. Have you ever confided in someone about a difficult moment, expecting empathy, only to sense a flicker of something else, relief, satisfaction, or even quiet amusement? Maybe it was in the way their lips curled ever so slightly when they said, "Oh, that's too bad." Maybe it was in the way their eyes lacked true concern as they offered a hollow, "I'm sure things will get better." They may not openly celebrate your hardship, but deep inside, they are comforted by it. Why? Because your struggles reassure them. They ease their own insecurities by seeing that you 2. Face obstacles. Your failures become proof that you are not above them, that you are not invincible. To them, your misfortune is not something to mourn, it is something to measure against their own life, and if you are struggling, they feel a twisted sense of balance. History has no shortage of those who delighted in the struggles of others. Consider Julius Caesar, whose rise to power was met not only with admiration but with hidden resentment among his peers. The Roman senators, who had once walked beside him, watched with concealed envy as he ascended beyond them. They waited, not for his continued success, but for his inevitable fall. When his enemies finally struck him down, many did not mourn. They felt a deep, unspoken relief. His greatness had always been a reminder of their own limitations, and his demise freed them from the weight of comparison. In Buddhism, this kind of mindset is seen as a product of the ego's grasping nature. The Buddha taught that true compassion means experiencing joy in another's happiness and sadness in their suffering. But a jealous mind, ruled by attachment to superiority, does the opposite. it finds pleasure in another's misfortune. Such a person is not truly living in harmony with others. They are trapped in an endless cycle of comparison, constantly measuring their worth against the successes and failures of those around them. So how do you handle someone who secretly enjoys your struggles? Do not seek comfort in the wrong places. A person who finds satisfaction in your hardship will never be a true source of support. Instead, turn to those whose care is genuine, see their reaction for what it is. Their hidden relief is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of their own self-doubt. Do not internalize their energy, keep moving forward. The greatest response to hidden jealousy is resilience. A wise person does not pause their journey because others are watching, waiting for them to stumble. They walk forward, steady and unshaken, knowing that another's silent hope for their downfall is nothing but a shadow cast by insecurity. A true friend celebrates your victories and stands by you in failure. A jealous person remains in the background, waiting for the moment your light dims, because only then do they feel their own shine a little brighter. Learn to see the difference. Sign number 5, they copy you while pretending to be original. The silent theft of identity. Jealousy does not always manifest as rivalry. Sometimes, it hides behind imitation. Have you ever noticed someone subtly adopting your mannerisms, interests, or even your ambitions, but acting as if they came up with them on their own? Perhaps they dismissed your choices at first, only to later follow the same path. They may never acknowledge their mimicry, yet their actions reveal an undeniable truth. They envy you, but instead of competing or celebrating your success, they try to absorb it. At first, it might feel like admiration. You tell them about a new hobby, and suddenly, they are passionate about it too. You wear a unique style, and within weeks, they are dressing the same way. You introduce an idea, and soon, they present it as if it were their own creation. But flattery turns into discomfort when you realize they are not just inspired, they are trying to be you, while never crediting your influence. History offers many examples of this strange form of jealousy. Nikola Tesla, a brilliant inventor, was often overshadowed by Thomas Edison, who took credit for several of Tesla's innovations. While Edison was an accomplished inventor in his own right, he saw Tesla's groundbreaking work as something to capitalize on rather than acknowledge. Similarly, in the world of art, many pioneering creators have watched their originality be repackaged by those who came after them, imitators who enjoyed the benefits of innovation without bearing the weight of true creativity. Buddhism teaches that every person walks a unique path. To imitate another is to reject one's own journey. The Buddha himself did not seek to replicate the philosophies of his time, he walked away from them to find his own truth. Those who live by imitation are often disconnected from themselves, searching for meaning in the reflections of others rather than in their own essence. But no one can steal who you are. They may copy your actions, your choices, even your outward identity, but they can never replicate your soul, your experiences, or your wisdom. So how should you respond to this kind of jealousy? Do not let their imitation unsettle you. A shadow can mimic movement, but it has no life of its own. Your journey remains uniquely yours, recognize their struggle. Their copying is not a sign of strength, but of uncertainty. They do not yet trust their own path, continue being yourself. Imitation does not diminish originality, it only highlights the lack of it in others. A tree does not pause its growth just because another tree begins to resemble it. It stretches toward the sky, unbothered, knowing that its roots run deep in its own truth. Imagine moving through life completely unaffected by negativity, no more doubts, no more energy drained by hidden jealousy, just pure inner peace and confidence in your own journey. When you stop seeking validation from others and detach from their opinions, you unlock a freedom that few ever experience. Now is the time to take control of your emotional well-being. Start by recognizing jealousy not as an attack, but as a sign of someone else's suffering. Choose to respond with wisdom, not frustration. Choose compassion over resentment. And most importantly, choose to walk your path without being weighed down by the insecurities of others. We are building a community of mindful seekers, united in wisdom and growth. Join us by subscribing, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and spreading this message of peace. Let's cultivate inner strength together, so no external force can shake our tranquility. Your energy is sacred. Protect it, nurture it, and let it shine.